Across the last 30 days, there's an average of about 8,500 people who are playing the Halo franchise that are trackable on Steam. Obviously, many more across other platforms, but the idea, if you have 20,000 in Steam, then you have 10,000 in Steam, that's halved. Maybe that'll be reflective of some other places as well. So we can still use Steam as an indicator, we just have to know what it is. Now, the funny thing is that just under half of the average players that the Halo franchise gets on Steam comes from the Master Chief Collection. And the Master Chief Collection it's really a hell of a thing. It is an incredible value for money. It also did launch in a very messy state. It also had some teething problems on PC. Those have now been patched up to the point where MCC is a genuinely incredible product. They, of course, were going to wind down some of their MCC support because of Infinite. Now what's quite interesting, though, is we're seeing them, monetize Master Chief Collection further. Some people would maybe think, have they realized that a lot of their people are actually not playing the new game with the long-tail monetization? Perhaps instead they're playing the old game and it doesn't have the long-tail monetization, therefore we should bring the monetization to the old game. That's certainly not what they claim, but you still have to think about what they're doing and why. So let's get into the story with Spartan points. Yes, okay, here's the deal, right? MCC had seasons before Halo Infinite came out, and essentially, you would go through the little season pass thingy, you'd get your stuff. Now what they're doing, though, is they're working out how to make this all make sense in a world that doesn't have seasons. So basically, they talked about how that over the years, MCC has been continually supported with new content, that it's got over 1,000 plus customization items spanning armor, attachments, nameplates, weapons, vehicle skins, armor effects, that kind of thing. This is a lot. They now say that for people who are new to the game, or who just don't have a massive amount of time to unlock these updates, or are just completionists that want everything, they are internally exploring a potential new feature for the future in the form of purchasable Spartan points.
I love that. I absolutely love that this is a new form of monetization. And even in their kind of everyone who really likes this game is probably going to read this blog post, they call it a new feature. This is a new feature, and we're adding this feature for you because we know you don't want to play this game all the time for these rewards, so we'll do you a solid and let you buy them.
Yeah, and look, there's a way that they can really help themselves out here that they should really do, but they haven't mentioned it. So they basically said that it's important to know we're happy with the current system, where basically you earn SP by completing challenges and leveling up through play. What's funny, though, is by the time you hit level 100, you actually stop getting them from levels. Instead, you just get them from doing the challenges. So a lot of players are even a bit frustrated that, they're going to do this new system, but as you just fill up, you can't just fill up the XP bar again and again and again to get more of the stuff like you could in, say, Overwatch. So they've said that this new thing would be an optional additive alternative. They are continually talking in ways that are just trying to downplay this as a sort of a new money thing.
Yeah, they're selling it, basically.
Yeah. So for people who might find the vast scope of content to be an intimidating amount of playtime, or maybe want to get ahead on or skip the grind, or maybe want to get some specific items they really want, and in the interest of transparency for our dedicated and passionate community, we wanted to inform you of this exploration in advance and provide assurance that purchasable Spartan points will be an additive feature. The one thing we can definitely tell from this is they are aware that by default people are going to be against something like this. Ultimately, it is this form of monetization being put into a game that previously did not have it.
Yeah, because it was a game that you bought. It was a full price game. But I think it was maybe accidentally a live service.
Yes.
I think they intended to release it and go, hey, here it's done. And they're like, we need to update it. Then I guess we'll have seasons in it. And I'll run through. It's like, we've accidentally had a live service, but we haven't monetized it. And that was okay because all bets hedged on Halo Infinite. And now MCC is actually a substantial portion of the Halo player base. Now they're like, I guess it's time to monetize the Halo player base, like we intend to do with Infinite, but kind of failed to.
That's the thing that I really found interesting about this, just how much MCC is part of Halo, and I suppose really how not well Infinite is doing. Like, they said a lot of promising things around Season 2, but a lot of them were decently long-term things, and we do have some pretty cool leaked things to highlight for you, because the upcoming Forge mode looks, like, seriously incredible. But evidently, they were just not ready to support this game with the quantity of content that people actually wanted. So, as for why people are a bit pissed about this, I mean, some of it's just quite funny. Another classic example of 3 steps forward, 43 steps back. I kind of love that one. But the idea here for people is just like, you know, it doesn't feel good to just suddenly have the thing be monetized. And I think in a world where if you're level 100, you can't continually get those points by leveling up, I think that really sucks. Yeah. So if they wanted this to feel significantly better, that is the feature I think that they would have to change.
Yeah, and that's the thing where obviously that's kind of the reason they're trying to highlight it now, because they want transparency with their dedicated and passionate community. And that's like the double-edged sword of having a dedicated and passionate community. You're like, hey, we're good this thing, and if they don't like it, they will tell you to your face. It will be all over the internet immediately. There'll be dozens of videos. There'll be articles kind of that highlight it, knowing it's bad, but they'll toe the line of, we're just telling you about this. But then the comments will be like, fuck 343, this is an abomination, they should never do this to the Halo franchise. And I think that's just, well, I mean, they've got the feedback they've wanted. Hopefully they can actually have a dialogue and kind of dial it in a little bit, because people really are profoundly unhappy about it.
Yeah, it's a shame. Like, I'll continue to say MCC is just straight up worth buying. Like, it is great. For sure. But yeah, this kind of stuff sucks. The idea of microtransactions hurting Halo, that is actually something I'd also agree with. There's like a cheapening of Halo that came with Infinite free-to-play. And it's quite strange, because with Infinite free-to-play, they don't seem to be getting the player counts. Like, that's the other thing to remember. Infinite is really struggling, and you don't have to buy it.
That's really awkward, because, I mean, you'd even expect just a general, I guess the casual kind of dropping people in and going, oh yeah, I'll try Halo out for a little bit. Or even, you know, if you're cynical about it, bots. And obviously there's no way to monetize, but, you know, free-to-play games with only a couple thousand players is really like a pretty substantial, I guess, admission of their quality. Which is weird, because Halo is a good game to play, but everything else must be the problem. And then if you're wondering, well, if Halo Infinite is relatively speaking a pretty good game to play, but lacks content, and the player base considers it bad by virtue of not actually playing, because the kind of numbers tell the story as opposed to the qualitative stuff, then it must be how the game feels to play, which then boils down to progression, which everyone says has been ruined by microtransactions, ruined by the battle pass, ruined by how poorly the challenges are implemented. And then you go, yeah, that's it.
I think it's basically that. Okay, so I think this is an exchange we saw on Twitter that's useful here, right? So starting off with Simon here saying, I disagree, particularly with the way they're doing it at MCC. Everything is still earnable via gameplay, as it always has. They're just adding the option if you choose. That's how it should be in any game. I'd say generally, okay, fair, yeah. There's lots of games, actually, where you can't earn the cosmetic without grinding. So the idea of being able to earn it through gameplay, but then have the purchase thing, that seems like a little bit more reasonable. It's like, imagine a League of Legends where if you were just so good or so dedicated to a champ, you would like end up earning the skin.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I don't know if you can do that or not. Something to that effect, right? Where it's there's kind of two ways to go for a more free-to-play game. The reply, though, hard disagree. The game doesn't need it. It's fine without them. Nobody asked or ever wanted them. So bad, no matter how unobtrusive you make it. And that's kind of like the thing that is interesting to me. There's a difference, I think, between MCC and Infinite. I think the cosmetics and stuff like that in MCC just felt better than Infinite, because they kind of had that basis of the older games. Whereas with Infinite, you see it designed for microtransactions from the ground up, which led to a whole bunch of concessions that made it fundamentally just significantly less satisfying to progress through.
Yeah, because I think that's ultimately the fear that everyone's getting to, where it isn't that microtransactions are inherently necessarily bad, because people look at like League of Legends, as you mentioned, and go, hey, well, that's fine. People look at Path of Exile and go, oh, well, that's fine. And obviously Halo Infinite's free to play. Obviously MCC isn't, but it's fairly cheap and it's a very long running game, so you could argue they need revenue from somewhere. But it's like people go microtransactions, and in their head they don't go, okay, let's look at this as a holistic problem. Let's look at this from all the different super proper ways of taking all the information is. They have the emotional response as humans do, and that emotional response is tied into, well, what did microtransactions do for Halo over here? Oh, they atomized and broke down the game, and they made Halo different to what Halo was.
Yes.
Microtransactions changed Halo for the worse. In this game, what's to say they won't do the exact same for MCC?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, if the Infinite system was exactly like this new system from MCC, it would be significantly better, and we maybe wouldn't even be having this conversation in the first place. And Infinite was just such a misfire. So it's this strange thing, because I understand the need to have long-tail revenue in a game. And I get for a lot of consumers, they're like, well, that's not my fucking problem. That's your business.
Yeah.
But then, if you want more content, if you want more updates, if you want more work to be done, I think reasonably, you know, if they're not seeing more and more and more sales as they add those features, which would sort of indicate that like they're kind of capping out the audience who are interested in their product, at that stage, then it's like, well, you got to monetize the people that you've got in order to support continuing developing the thing. So in that case, it's like, well, what do you actually want from this game 343? Because if they announce this, and they also said, this is because we want to increase the long-tail revenue of the game so that we can fund continued development. Here are the things that we would like to develop. Now, that's, I think, the sort of thing where they're not really able to say that because, you know, can they say those things with a big degree of surety? Because maybe they put this system in and people just barely spend money in it. You know, they're making like, I don't know, $3,000 a day. It's just not enough to get a development team to make, to make shit, right? So that's the challenging thing. I think that rather than announce this and try to just say it's additive, it's not that important, don't worry, it's okay, it would be better to announce this and then also to communicate why this is a benefit to somebody who's not going to participate in it. And then I think they should also just add that Overwatch style kind of infinite leveling thing where you get like a point every time you level.
Yeah, because I think that's
an easy way out of this, basically.
Yeah, that's where the transparency they talk about kind of falls a little bit apart, where it's like, that's transparency within the realm of, hey, we're talking to you as game developers, not game publishers and business owners and business runners, because obviously the person writing that's the community writer. They're not going to be able to say all the stuff and make the decision to go, well, we'll be super transparent about our entire business operation here. No one's going to really want that. You don't want players looking behind the curtain too much, although the industry definitely has that problem a lot.
You don't want it too much, but I think a degree of that, like, okay, I'm not going to bring up Star Citizen as an example of all this done well, because they have had blunders and they have done some real stupid shit. But I think they've been open enough to the point where their community has probably granted them more latitude than just about any friggin' community would.
For sure.
Right? And I think it's because they maybe have a bit more of an understanding of what actually is going on and what actually gets done. So when it seems like a sort of a black box, well, that's kind of hard if you're really coming up with an ask, and I think this is an ask of the audience.
Yeah, and that's a case where, because obviously, like, we're going to get into it, but there's a lot of stuff happening at MCC, and they are kind of winding down a little bit, but it is effectively a live service game that's getting more content than Halo Infinite is, at least in the short term so far. It is actually getting updates, and if they actually sat down and went, we have all this stuff that we've done, all the stuff we've done, here's some of the stuff we're going to do, and they have said this is stuff we want to do, here's our wish list for like cleaning up the project and carrying on its legacy. All they have to really do is say, we can afford it because we're Microsoft, but that's not how things work. We need to get results in this money to get to be allowed to make this.
Yeah.
So if you want to support us, this is what you do. Engage with this in some capacity, or maybe they'll throw something else in to kind of monetize it a little bit, make it a little bit more of a, hey, this is a community project, but I guess it's Microsoft and 343, they don't really want to do that, but that's what I think would make this more palatable, as opposed to you greedy bastards, which is what everyone's thinking.
Yeah, I think the other problem is, because this is a bit of a classic game project, it's not like there's a massive amount of new maps or like that kind of content being added, and ultimately somebody who works in maps, like, I mean, maybe they're an external or something, but surely there's another game that's in dire need of maps that also is a Halo. Now, speaking of the performance of Halo games, so if you take a look here at MCC, you can definitely see that like it's doing pretty well. I mean, maybe that's too. Basically, it's stable enough. Yeah. It has its people. If you want to play some Halo, you can do that. Okay, I'm not going to say it's doing fantastically. There were interesting times, though, where it was like almost trading blows with Infinite, which was like the kind of crazy thing. But yeah, look, just a 4,500 player all-time, 24-hour peak on Steam. That's like kind of the numbers we're getting at peak times. Like, that's quite a few players. That's a number of players that is actually comparable to the numbers that are playing Infinite. So you can kind of see why they would actually want to try to dip into this audience a bit more. Now, overall, they basically said, as of September of last year, that they're going to scale back the seasonal model for MCC because they don't want to interfere with Infinite, but they're still going to do things. So in April 2022, they had some new updates be announced and released, and it's pretty cool stuff. So a custom mode, Flood Fight, was added that basically lets you do the firefight mode of ODST with the Flood. That's pretty cool.
Good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that's, I think, especially with ODST and the way that it plays. Campaign crossplay for Halo 3 and ODST across platforms, mod tools for ODST, new skulls for ODST 2 and 3, and then some UI and server browser tweaks. They also, they do have some remaining plans as well for, like, modding and Steam Workshop for every game in MCC. Like, that's pretty awesome for Steam, right? And I suppose they maybe see it. Maybe they've understood, like, okay, we can't just have a bunch of people mapping and just making content for all of these games. Because how do you even do that? Like, how do you just, like, okay, we're going to add a Halo 2 map, and a Halo 3 map, and a Halo... What? It's confusing. Because, like, you're not going to touch Halo 4 much because people don't play that as much.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. It's like you'd almost have to choose a part of the game. But if they just have Steam Workshop and mod tools, then they can maybe tap into the thing that classically would keep people playing Halo, which is those like novel sort of forge mode custom game enabled experiences.
Yeah, and I think as we'll talk a little bit about Infinite later, they very much know that's a part of the plan and has worked in the past. And I think there was a light bulb went off at 343, which is we're having trouble making enough content. Let the users make the content. Yeah.
And I think that's basically our bridge into Infinite. So if we take a look at the numbers for Infinite, it's bad. It's bad. Like, I think you have averages that are similar. I mean, here we have a 24-hour peak that's just a little bit higher than MCC. Like, it's brutal. And of course, you look at the new season. Look at this. Woo! And then most of the people are gone.
I mean, yeah, if you want another comparison for this, as of the last 30 days, Battlefield 2042 is now beating Halo Infinite on Steam.
Oh, easily.
Yeah, it's the last 30 days for Battlefield is 5,300, and there in Halo it's 4,700. So that's the story of, hey, we've made promises and we've made content, we've done enough change for players to go back in, versus Halo, which doesn't have that yet.
Kind of look at 2042, like it's done a decently good job of like holding its players, whereas like you even look at the drop pod that launched on June 14th, and you're like, where's the bump for this drop pod? It's tiny. Because
the question is, what was in the drop pod? Where was the drop in the pod? What was it? And it was a couple bug fixes. It was a couple super minor balance changes, I think. And then a couple of little things like you can't play ranked right away. You have to play 25 non-ranked playlist matches first to stop free-to-play people hopping in and griefing rank and stuff. And like, that's a good enough hotfix. But to call it a drop pod, it doesn't really have much in the player experience.
It degrades what a drop pod means, which I think means that in future people with like drop pod, oh, that's just a hotfix. I'm not interested. So that's tricky. Now, there are some other things. I think the hour-long prototype of Forge that leaked in February of this year is one of the most incredible things. Yeah. So here's an example of a map basically in a different weather condition. Here is a map, different time of day. And then when you go through this, it actually turns out they've got the weapon... so there's a weapon combining glitch. They've now basically made that a feature. And if you look here, like, this looks like using blueprints in Unreal.
It's crazy.
Like, they have a node editor
No,
That's insane. That's insane for just the game's, out of the box tools.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing where people compare, like, well, Forge is, why is it taking so long? Why is it so late? Why is it going to be like a year after launch? Or that was what people were talking about because of the season lengths. And then I guess you have to look at like what constituted tools back in the day versus what constitutes mod tools now. And it's a completely different ballgame. But it looks like they're actually spending the time to make that actually a reality, which is cool.
We don't have it, but like there was some leaked footage of basically a gravity gun.
Yeah.
Maybe that is in this. I forgot. No. Yeah. Just have that. Like, that's the grav gun. They've made it in the mod tools. Like, I know it's so unfortunate what's happened with Infinite, but this is incredible. Could you imagine if we had this in Halo 3? Or something like... Right? So they've made these like truly incredible tools. It's just so sad that they're late.
Yeah.
Because if this was here nearer or closer to launch, I think what happened is people didn't have enough content. So then they wandered off. But it could be in a world where they didn't have enough content. They had a hunger for content, but then all the community tools were there to make content, such whenever somebody goes and checks the PC Gamer headlines, there is maybe, an article compiling, here's 10 crazy things people have done in Halo Infinite. And then suddenly that could be really engaging for people, right? Like, it's such a shame.
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing I've been kind of thinking about recently in terms of games, especially. I thought about it a lot whenever I saw the reveal of Hyenas, the Creative Assembly and Sega shooter, but also in the terms of how, like, Netflix is kind of losing all of its kind of popularity and strength despite a content slate. And I think it's a case of you need to win people's hearts and their minds, as well as, like, their time and their content and their attention. You need to win, you need to win the narrative, basically. You need to be Halo Infinite. What is your emotional reaction to hearing Halo Infinite? And I know mine is like a
Yeah.
Whereas, for people it should be like, oh, that's cool. That's great.
Now, there is one iffy thing. So there's a leaker, Sean W., who said, Forge is so close. 343i is going to be heavily leaning on Forge, in particular Forge content created by the community, to the point where Forge may create some really bad controversy because of one plan they have for it. We do not know what that plan is. Obviously, you think about monetization somehow, right? The idea that they have some sort of plan that this leaker thinks could cause a really bad controversy is certainly saddening, given how incredible the tool set seems to be.
Yeah, I will also say, for a bit of balance, and also to be fair, Sean also said that it's could be a lot closer than anyone expects. Forge could be released, soon, TM. And also that the whole, the entire video that Sean did talking about what he heard from people was, by his own admission, intended to be a dose of hopium. And until he heard what these people who knew stuff from inside 343 were telling him, he had, no hope for Halo. But after he was done talking to them about kind of how Forge looks internally, the fact that it might be out a little bit sooner, the kind of quality of it, as well as stuff like the campaign DLC, and some talk about, the Battle Royale, which is intended for fall 2023. That's a little bit away yet.
2023!
And campaign DLC after 2024.
After 2024!
Yeah, so there's going to be a very long tail on Halo Infinite in terms of content.
Is Season 3 going to be 1.5 years long?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of this is not going to be abandoned. They have plans to make a lot of stuff for this, and they have plans to make stuff better for it, and they're doing smart things like relying on Forge, so the community can create content wherever they can't. So as long as they don't do anything really stupid, like put Forge behind a big paywall or something crazy like that, which they probably will because it's the modern day, what are you going to do? As long as they don't do that, there's a decent bit of hope for it in the future. It's just they're doing too many things and it's all way too slow.
Yeah, you almost wonder if Certain Affinity weren't making a Battle Royale and instead were just making map packs. Would that be more prudent in the short term?
Yep. But that's the thing. Well, I mean, that's...
But they're trying to play the long game.
Yeah.
They probably have zero expectations of making money right now.
Yep. And that's what ties it into MCC being monetized.
Yeah.
Because you're going, why are we not monetizing half of the Halo player base? We're spending this much money trying to get money in. But there's this avenue to it now. Why not just do it now and eat whatever bad PR comes of it? Maybe try to be a bit nice about it. It won't be as successful as if Halo Infinite did well. But if they need if 343 literally need to buy time, so Microsoft don't go, where's all our fucking money?
It's like, probably had to say that a lot already.
Yeah, they've had to say it a lot because Halo Infinite is already delayed by a year. It's like, yeah, do you want to delay it for 4 years so you can have some DLC and a Battle Royale? No. So they're in a tough place, but it's money's the business.
Could you imagine if they delayed it by 2 years? It came out with campaign co-op, Forge, more the complete package. Yeah, it would be a radically different conversation.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? Where they keep putting themselves in this, we need to release now, so we'll have to No Man's Sky ourselves. And I hope they use that terminology internally. I hope they do go, we have to No Man's Sky this, which is release it, pray to God we can pull it back.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's tired of that. Everyone's sick of that. And it's just setting these ideas in players' heads of that game is shit. And you have to win so hard you have to fight so hard to win that attitude away from people and pull it back into, no, the game is good now. And it's just going to take a lot of time and money. So then they have to get the money elsewhere. And you're like,
that's just the struggle. That's the struggle. So essentially, humongously suffering from long-term planning, evidently not being where it should have been.
Yep.
They've fucked it up. And now, despite their best efforts, it is still fucked up. They've now pissed off their community because they announced something that basically most people will see to be bad, but they haven't educated people on why it's a good thing for them, which is some 101 shit.
Yeah.
Because if you come out, right, being like trying to always kind of hedge your bets on, like, say, the Spartan point system, it makes you look weak. And one of the tricky things about public relations is whenever people could be sort of angry at you, but then you make yourself look weak by kind of not being confident, hedging your bets, not telling people, oh no, straight up, like, we're doing this and it's good for you because of this. Like, you obviously, if you're arrogant and you misfire, you're going to get in trouble. But equally, if you kind of under-deliver and you also seem like, you know, you're trying to hedge your bets against people's response, they're going to perceive you as weak and then go in hard again.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of unfortunately how people are. So there you go. It's a big old disaster. That said, the Forge mode really does look pretty damn awesome. So if they can pull off the Forge mode and this really bad controversy doesn't come to pass, which hopefully it won't, then it may not be the Halo that you want to play as like a big crazy competitive game or something, because maybe just won't have the content. But if you want to just dick around with your friends, make some really cool maps, have crazy times, then I think this could be awesome. I mean, just thinking about like the amount of creativity and craziness and like different kinds of game modes that people could create purely enabled by the weapon, customization system. Like that could do crazy stuff. So absolutely. I think there is actually a fair amount of hope for Halo in that I don't think it will be abandoned. And I think they do have pretty major long-term plans. I think just expectations absolutely need to be measured for like the next year, maybe the next two. But if Forge is good and it comes online within the next like 3 months, then we could be looking at something pretty good, at least for some people. So that's the situation in Halo. My God, someday a major tentpole shooter is going to be wholly uncontroversial and just really good, and we can all be happy, but not this day.
I think for now, you're just going to have to, if you want a good Halo game, obviously MCC is good and stuff, you might have to wait for Halo Mobile.
Oh, don't do this, man.
I'm not joking, because Call of Duty Mobile is a pretty good Call of Duty game.
It is.
Probably better than like Vanguard, as far as most people are concerned.
I've been playing it using the backbone on my phone. It's really fun.
Yeah.
That said, there are so many pop-ups that it just makes me dizzy.
Yeah, and then there's stuff like Battlefield Mobile. Looks like a pretty good Battlefield, where 2042 has been a mess and they've had to recover. So maybe Halo Mobile will be good. I'm sorry for having to say this.
That's the way of it.
What a nightmare.
All right, take care. We'll see you tomorrow.